Prepare to rethink everything you thought you knew. This is Mind Benders, your source for the most mind-twisting facts that will expand your understanding of the world. Let's bend some minds.
The hook. Imagine our world, a world of intricate supply chains, instant communication, and globalized economies. Now imagine that in the span of a single lifetime, it all vanished. Imagine the great cities of the world, London, Beijing, New York, reduced to rubble, their names forgotten. Imagine our libraries burned, our knowledge lost, our entire way of life erased from history. It sounds like the plot of a post-apocalyptic movie, but it's not fiction. It happened. Around the year 1250 BCE, the Eastern Mediterranean was a thriving, interconnected world. Great empires, the powerful Egyptians, the mighty Hittites in Anatolia, the sophisticated Mycenaeans in Greece, were locked in a complex dance of trade, diplomacy, and war. They built monumental cities, commanded vast armies, and created exquisite art. Their world was, in many ways, the first great era of globalization. They traded in copper from Cyprus and tin from Afghanistan, combining them to forge the bronze that defined their age and powered their economies. They sent letters to one another on clay tablets, discussing royal marriages, trade disputes, and military alliances. They believed their world was eternal, their civilizations the pinnacle of human achievement. Then, around 1177 BCE, it all came crashing down. In the space of just a few decades, nearly every major city in the region was violently destroyed. The Hittite Empire vanished from history. The Mycenaean palaces were burned to the ground. The great trade routes that were the lifeblood of this world simply ceased to exist. Famine, chaos, and darkness descended. An entire international system built over centuries was wiped from the face of the earth. For centuries afterward, populations plummeted. Entire writing systems were lost. Legends spoke of a heroic age of gods and warriors, a faint memory of a world that was no more. This wasn't a slow decline. This was a sudden, catastrophic collapse, a true ancient apocalypse. The question that has haunted historians and archaeologists for over a century is, why? What single event, what terrifying force could bring so many powerful civilizations to their knees, all at once? The answer, we're now discovering, is far more terrifying than a single cause. It was everything, everywhere, all at once. Part 2. The core premise. The initial theories about the late Bronze Age collapse focused on finding a single culprit, a lone gunman, so to speak. For a long time, the prime suspects were a mysterious band of marauders mentioned in Egyptian texts, the Sea Peoples. But as our scientific tools have become more advanced, a new, more complex, and frankly, more relevant picture has emerged. This wasn't a simple invasion. It was a systems collapse. Think of it like a perfectly balanced Jenga tower. The Bronze Age world was that tower, with each block representing a critical part of its structure: agriculture, trade, government, climate. For centuries, the tower was stable. But then, multiple hands began pulling out blocks at the same time. This is what we call a perfect storm, or a multiplier effect. It's not one single catastrophe, but a cascade of interconnected crises, each one amplifying the others until the entire system breaks down. The main drivers of this collapse, the forces that tore that world apart, are not one, but at least 4 major horsemen of this ancient apocalypse. First, catastrophic and prolonged climate change, leading to severe drought and famine. Second, a terrifying series of earthquakes, what some archaeologists call an earthquake storm, that shattered infrastructure and broke the spirits of the people. Third, the breakdown of a highly centralized and fragile economic system, one that was dangerously over-specialized. And finally, yes, there were invaders, mass migrations of desperate starving people, the so-called sea peoples, who were not so much the cause of the collapse, but a brutal symptom of it. This wasn't a story of one empire conquering another. This was the story of a globalized system becoming too rigid, too complex, and too brittle to survive the shocks that were coming. It's a story we need to understand, because that Jenga tower of an interconnected world should sound very, very familiar. Part 3. The Deep Dive. To understand how it all fell apart, we first have to appreciate what was lost. The Late Bronze Age world, from roughly 1600 to 1200 BCE, was a marvel of complexity. In Greece, the Mycenaeans, the heroes of Homer's Iliad, built their mighty citadel at Mycenae with its famous Lion Gate. Their society was a palatial economy, a highly centralized, top-down system where all goods, from olive oil to wool to bronze weapons, flowed into the central palace for accounting and redistribution. In modern-day Turkey, the Hittite Empire controlled a vast multicultural territory from their impregnable capital of Hattusa. They were a military and diplomatic superpower, the only state strong enough to fight the Egyptian New Kingdom to a standstill at the famous Battle of Kadesh. And of course, there was Egypt, ancient and powerful, ruled by legendary pharaohs like Ramesses the Great. They controlled the gold of Nubia and the endless bounty of the Nile. These three superpowers were connected by a sophisticated network of sea lanes across the Mediterranean, the information superhighways of their time. They exchanged luxury goods, raw materials, and even royal brides. But this entire glittering system had a fatal flaw: its dependence on bronze. Bronze is not a natural metal. It's an alloy of copper and tin. And the sources of copper and tin were often thousands of miles apart. The system worked only as long as these long-distance trade routes remained open. This hyper-specialization made them incredibly efficient, but also incredibly fragile. Then, the first block was pulled from the tower: the climate. Through paleoclimatology, studying ancient pollen, lake sediments, and tree rings, scientists have uncovered evidence of a sudden, severe, and prolonged period of drought that began around 1250 BCE. A 300-year drought. This wasn't just a bad harvest. This was generational. It would have caused widespread crop failures across the eastern Mediterranean. For empires whose power was based on feeding their people and their armies, this was an existential threat. Famine leads to unrest. Starving farmers can no longer support the palace elite. They abandon their fields. They become refugees, or they become rebels. As societies began to weaken from within due to hunger, the ground itself began to betray them. Archaeological evidence from dozens of sites across Greece, Anatolia, and the Levant shows massive destruction layers, all dated to the same 50-year period between 1225 and 1175 BCE. Cities like Mycenae, Tiryns, Medea, and Troy show signs of being leveled by powerful earthquakes. Some scholars propose the theory of an earthquake storm, a cascade of seismic events along the region's fault lines. Imagine you are a citizen of a great city. First, the rains fail and you begin to starve. Then, the earth itself shakes your world to pieces. Your faith in your gods and your kings would be shattered. This is the second block pulled. The internal stability of the great kingdoms was breaking. And this is where the sea peoples enter the story. The Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses III inscribed his great victory over them on the walls of his temple at Medinet Habu. He describes a terrifying confederation of peoples from the sea, who made conspiracy in their islands. They came with their families in ox carts, suggesting they were not just raiders, but migrants looking for a new home. Who were they? Their names, Peliset, Teker, Sheridan, Denyon, are mysterious. For a long time, we thought they were the sole cause, a barbarian horde that simply destroyed everything. But the modern view is different. The sea peoples were likely the product of the collapse, not its cause. They were the Mycenaeans, Anatolians, and others whose own lands had been destroyed by drought and earthquake. Displaced, desperate, and starving, they took to their ships. They were the final brutal domino to fall. They were the wave that crashed upon a shoreline that was already crumbling. Part 4. Answering key questions. So, when we ask that crucial question, what really caused the Bronze Age collapse, the answer is profoundly unsatisfying to those looking for a simple narrative. There was no single villain. The real cause was the fragility of the system itself. It was a confluence of factors, a climatic shift that destroyed the agricultural base, an earthquake storm that shattered key infrastructure, and the resulting social breakdown, mass migration, and warfare that delivered the final blow. This also helps us understand our second key question. Who were the Sea Peoples? They weren't a mysterious, unified empire from beyond the horizon. They were us. They were the people of the Bronze Age world, uprooted and set adrift by catastrophe. The Peliset are widely believed to be the ancestors of the biblical Philistines, who settled on the coast of Canaan. Others may have been displaced Achaeans or Luans from Anatolia. They were the symptom of a dying world, a river of humanity overflowing its banks. This multi-causal explanation also answers why some empires like the Hittites and Mycenaeans fell so completely, why
others, like Egypt, survived, albeit barely. The Mycenaean palatial system was a house of cards. With its rigid top-down control, once the central palace was destroyed, by earthquake, fire, or rebellion, the entire system ceased to function. There was no plan B. The Hittite Empire was fighting multiple enemies on its frontiers and was heavily reliant on grain imports from its vassals. When the drought hit and the trade routes were severed by pirates and raiders, their heartlands starved and their empire disintegrated with shocking speed. Their capital, Hattusa, was burned and abandoned, its very name lost to history for 3,000 years. Egypt, however, was different. It had a long history of centralized rule, a uniquely fertile and defensible geography in the Nile Valley, and a massive agricultural surplus even in lean times. Ramses III was able to muster the resources to fight off the Sea Peoples in 2 massive battles, on land and sea. He saved Egypt, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. Egypt was bankrupted and exhausted. It entered a long period of decline, a shadow of its former self. It survived the collapse, but it never truly recovered its superpower status. Part 5. The Unseen Consequences. The immediate aftermath of the collapse was a new Dark Age. The vibrant, colorful world of the Bronze Age was replaced by a simpler, poorer, and more isolated existence. In Greece, the population may have dropped by as much as 90%. The complex art of writing, Linear B, used by the Mycenaean scribes, was completely forgotten. For 400 years, Greece was illiterate. International trade, the engine of the Bronze Age, ground to a halt. People forgot how to build with cut stone. They lived in small, impoverished villages, their horizons shrinking from an international world to just the next valley over. The epic poems of Homer, like the Iliad and the Odyssey, are now thought to be folk memories passed down orally through this Dark Age, preserving a distorted, mythologized echo of the lost Mycenaean world. But out of these ashes, new ideas and new technologies were forged. The very event that ended the Bronze Age gave birth to the next chapter of human history, the Iron Age. The complex supply chains for bronze were gone, but iron ore is one of the most common elements on Earth. It's everywhere. Any local chieftain could equip his own small army with iron weapons. Iron wasn't better than bronze at first, but it was democratic. It decentralized power. It broke the old monopoly of the great palace economies and allowed for new, smaller, more agile societies to emerge. The Phoenicians, the Israelites, the Aramaeans, and eventually the classical Greeks rose from the wreckage. The collapse acted as a great reset button. It wiped the slate clean. The rigid, top-heavy empires were gone, replaced by a more dynamic and perhaps more resilient collection of smaller states and cultures. The loss of a unified world allowed for 1,000 different flowers to bloom. The alphabet, a far simpler and more accessible writing system invented by the Phoenicians, spread across the Mediterranean, bringing literacy back to Greece and laying the foundation for philosophy, democracy, and science. The consequences were profound. The end of one world was the necessary precondition for the beginning of another. The catastrophic failure of the Bronze Age system inadvertently paved the way for the classical world that would become the bedrock of Western civilization. Part 6. Synthesis and Conclusion. So we return to the ruins of that lost world, a world of bronze titans and globalized trade, and we see our own reflection in the dust. The story of the late Bronze Age collapse is the story of a system that became a victim of its own success. It was interconnected, efficient, and specialized, and for that very reason, it was fragile. It lacked resilience. It was brought down not by a single blow, but by a series of synergistic disasters. Climate change caused famine. Famine caused social unrest and migration. Earthquakes shattered infrastructure and faith. And the breakdown of trade starved the industrial centers of their most critical resource. It was a cascade failure, a domino effect on a geopolitical scale. And this is the ultimate lesson, the mind-bending takeaway from this ancient apocalypse. It's a 3,200-year-old warning. Our own civilization is infinitely more complex and interconnected than the Bronze Age world. Our supply chains are global. Our economies are intertwined. And we, too, face a confluence of unprecedented challenges. We face accelerating climate change, threatening our food and water supplies. We face geopolitical instability that threatens our global supply chains for everything from microchips to medicine. We build our world on complex systems we barely understand, assuming they will last forever. The people of Mycenae and Hattusa assumed the same thing. The Bronze Age collapse teaches us that forever can end in a generation. It shows us how quickly complexity can unravel into chaos. It reminds us that resilience, adaptability, and diversification are not just buzzwords, they are the keys to survival. The story isn't about the inevitability of collapse, but about the profound danger of ignoring the cracks that appear in the foundations of our world. So I leave you with this question. As we build our own ever more complex global systems, are we learning the lessons written in the ruins of the Bronze Age? Or are we simply building a taller, more intricate tower destined to one day face its own perfect storm? Let us know what you think in the comments below.
The world is full of fascinating paradoxes, isn't it? We hope today's facts truly bent your mind. If you're ready for more daily revelations that challenge the norm, subscribe to Mindbenders. Don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss a new video. Until next time, keep questioning.